Welcome to the ACU Online Writing Center's webinar, Memo Planning and Formatting. So this is a webinar where we look at a very specific genre of communication and the particular habits, constraints, conventions therein. If you are interested in other genres of business writing, I strongly encourage you to check out the many webinars that we have on our website. More on that a little bit. But if you're new to the Online Writing Center, we work with students at any point in the writing process, both through webinars such as this, through answering emails, and also through one-on-one appointments. You can either sign up for an asynchronous appointment where you upload your paper before the appointment time. We look at it, we send you feedback via email, or a real-time appointment where by phone or Zoom, you pose questions, we have answers, we talk about different things. It's really a question of what you're interested in at that time. I have many students who prefer asynchronous appointments because they work on their paper, they upload their paper, and then they go to sleep. And then they look at the feedback when it arrives in their inbox and they're more rested. Other people prefer to ask questions back and forth, and so a appointment via phone or Zoom might be better for you. Some people are more oral listeners, and so they prefer not to be distracted by the screen. Other people like to see everything, especially if it's wondering, how do I make it look that way? And being able to follow intuitively the motions on the screen. So matter of preference. And with that, let me tell you a little bit about some of the webinars that are related to this. So if you open up our writing webinars page, so this is on, get that up, there we go. So our writing webinars page, at the top, you will see we have a calendar schedule of all the webinars for the current term. And in the middle, you'll see a tabbed guide sorted by subject. So if you're, for example, taking a class in the HIED program, you could see all our course tie-ins there, sorted by the course and by the week. And we also have, at the bottom, we have an alphabetical guide. So if you were, say, looking for how to write a business letter, you can find that we have a webinar that actually was just offered an hour ago. That'll be on the website by the time you're viewing this video, about writing an advocacy letter. Also, you could search for different genres such as policy papers, white papers, and various scholarly communications as well. All right, with that, let us jump back to our main focus today, which is going to be looking at memos as a genre of communication and looking at this particularly through the lens of a assignment in our HIED program. Now, there are many other courses that require you to write memos, many in our business program as well, but it just happens we're using that as the focus today. All right, so let's talk about what a memo is. And here I'm going to use the words from George Mason University's Writing Center. A business memo is a short document used to transmit information within an organization. Emphasis on short. Memos are characterized by being brief, direct, and easy to navigate. They are less formal than letters, but should maintain a professional, succinct style. Often the purpose of a business memo is twofold: to identify a problem and propose a solution. Other times, memos may provide or request factual information. Now, the audience of a business memo is a particular one, not someone who is reading for pleasure, but someone for whom this is coming in a stream of work. Business memos, therefore, are designed to accommodate busy readers who want to find the information they need from the memo quickly and easily. And when you're communicating in a larger organization, they may be interested in a very specific part of your memo that pertains to them, not to the others, so it's helpful for them to be able to find that easily. Therefore, in writing a business memo, you should structure your memo to accommodate three kinds of readers. First, those who read only the executive summary, and that will be far more than just the executives. Those who skim the entire memo for its key points and a few details they're interested in. and those who read the entire document for the details that support its major claims or recommendations. Now, I once had an occasion to write a policy recommendation for the state of California's health department. And as part of that, when I was talking with the director, he said, you have to keep in mind that this is going to go to literally thousands of people who all have different jobs. And so we'll be looking for different things there according to whatever their job is. And so many of the people who are higher up in the chain will only read the executive summary or only read the bullet points. And there'll be people who skim looking for those bullet points and maybe what are two things that relate to their job. And then people who are tasked with implementing something or being tasked with, okay, tell me if there's anything wrong or anything we should change. Those people will be reading the entire document and really scrutinizing the details. So there are multiple constituents, multiple audiences here. And so some strategies to support that. First, always a good idea, I think. Start with the main point or detail that you're trying to bring to their attention. Number 2, use a professional and concise style. 3, use a subject line that immediately tells the reader what the memo is about. 4, provide a bulleted summary or overview of the main points, something that they can quickly look at and get a sense of, okay, this is what it's about. Am I for or against this in principle? That kind of quick decision before someone decides to read the whole thing. And then to use formatting, particularly headings, to signal structure, especially for readers who might skip to a specific section of interest. Now, there are some conventions for formatting memos that I thought it might be helpful to look at together because there's nothing quite like showing formatting. One moment. I don't think that screen share went quite right. There we go. You should now see we have the Purdue University Writing Lab website pulled up. And so they have a guide to writing a business memo. And they describe some of the more common things that I've seen at many different employers. First, they reiterate some of the principles we talked about, usually being 1 or 2 pages long, single spaced. You will see some that are 1.5 space. That's mainly for legibility. And left justified. So that means all the text is aligned left. You don't have indented first lines for paragraphs. It's partly about efficient space usage. It's partly how typewriters worked once upon a time. It also gives a certain formality to the appearance, a certain directness to it, and maximizes the space when you only have 1 or 2 pages to make your case. Instead of using indentations to show new paragraphs, skip a line between sentences. Yes. And the reason is that this facilitates scanning when people look through really fast. And it also facilitates speed reading. Speed reading is classically described as reading the first and last sentence in every paragraph. And so it's a lot easier to jump between them when there's this clear horizontal space between, this full width space between paragraphs. So we continue. Business material should be concise and easy to read. Therefore, it is beneficial to use headings and lists to help the reader pinpoint certain information. And I should specify here that when it says lists, we're talking about things like bulleted and numbered lists, rather than having an in-paragraph list. And there are cases when you would want that, but probably less likely in a memo. Why? Because the bulleted or numbered lists are actually easier and faster to read. There's more white space around them, and that makes it easy for people to spot something and easier for them to digest it. All right, now we move to a recommendation about headings, specifics on that. You can help your reader understand your memo better by using headings for the summary and the discussion segments that follow it. Now, keep in mind the earlier recommendation, the note that some people will only read the summary. So marking it is helpful for them. And to write headings that are short, but clarify the content of the segment. For example, instead of using summary for your heading, try new advertising recommendations, which is more specific. And you want those to align with the text before that. All right, now with reading in those lists, this is fairly straightforward. And we have a general suggestion about how you might divide it in terms of space. This will vary depending on the subject. It'll vary depending on how much background you need, but the general principle of having this be not too long, not too dense is a good idea. All right, let us look at another example here. So this is coming from the University of Southern California, and they put together a memo template that includes instructions on how to write a memo. Now they've done this up in email format, and you'll notice that this does mimic how an email will show up in most email reader programs, and that this happens to also coincide with the features of a memo that we were talking about just now. And so you'll see that we have the recipient name from, okay, this is all stuff you would put in when you are drafting an email. The date is added automatically when the email goes out. So if you're writing a memo that is circulating, in PDF form, then listing who is CC'd helps tell the other people who else will be getting this and who it can be referenced to. So for example, generally in a large corporation, there are fewer things that you CC the president on. But if you do, then it sends a particular message about it. Also, if the president says something and it's CC'd to a number of people, it's generally something that they're saying, hey, pay attention to this. But we see that this is text that is left aligned, that there is a single vertical space here spanning the full column in between our paragraphs. Headings, 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 closing. And then you might have a note saying that you've included certain attachments. Again, something that mimics how most corporate email software displays things. Now, something I want to call your attention to here is that because of the brevity and conciseness and focus of the memo, this does not have any dear so-and-so as you might see in, say, an advocacy letter or a personal letter. And so they specifically say, don't include a salutation. And you'll see that they specifically say, do not include a closing remark like simply, like sincerely. And this is a good guide here. A memo is a short but formal document that should quickly convey recommendations, rationale, and implications to your audience. Organize your thoughts, use visual cues, and keep it simple. Good advice. All right, let us now jump back to our slides and ask the question. All right, well, what's a context you might be writing a memo for? And this assignment asks you to do just that, writing a new vice president. So this is coming from HIED 622, the College Students and Student Development Theory course. And the assignment description begins with the preamble, asking you to look at what you are getting from the assignment, a comprehensive understanding of generational theory and its applicability to today's college students, to acquire that by way of having to organize this information for the benefit of someone else, and thus acquire a clearer understanding if you'd only read it with that application. Now, the instructions proper begin with some description of the context for this role-playing. You've recently been hired to supervise the admissions, recruiters, counselors at Anonymous University, a small private residential college. Your institution has been struggling for the past several years to meet its enrollment goals, and recently decided to fire the vice president for enrollment management and other senior divisional leaders. The president just announced the hiring of a new vice president for enrollment management who has significant sales, marketing, and business experience, but who has never worked in higher education or with college-age students. Now, you could make a similar assessment of many healthcare enterprises where the management does not have a hands-on set of work experience when they join this particular industry or area. And we see the instructions continue. You have been asked by the Director of Human Resources to provide a memo outlining the characteristics of today's students that will be a part of the new Vice President's onboarding materials. Drawing on this week's readings and class discussion, draft a 2 to 3 page memo, so a little on the longer side, a 2 to 3 page memo that contains information about today's students that you feel will be essential for the new Vice President of Enrollment Management to be aware of as they assume their new role. Your memo needs to outline how the specific generational characteristics that you identify would inform how the Vice President could work with that cohort group. And then we see, oh, this should have a title page and a reference page, most of the assignments at ACU Online, which are formatted according to APA guidelines. So with that in mind, if we're following APA guidelines, which includes double spacing, 12-point font, 1-inch margins all around, tab indenting the first line, that explains why we are looking at 2 to 3 pages, because if we collapse this from double spacing to single, we're looking at, this is roughly 1 to 1.5 pages of content, which is a good target length for a memo. Especially because, you know, the little notes on subject and such, recipients, CC'd, etc., those will take up some extra space. But the main content, 1 to 1.5 single space pages, translates to 2 to 3 double space pages here. All right. If we look at the rubric here, we see we have the requirement that you write specifically about generational cohorts, that there's outlining which specific characteristics are important in understanding how to work with them, that this is giving personal/professional observation, reference to the class readings and other sources, and then that last, it's an APA style and is well organized, formatted, proofread, etc. So we can see that we have a basic charge and not too much space to do it. So we need to be efficient. And that's what business memos are about. They're about giving very clear, targeted communications. And so with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at how we might craft a memo for something else. So if you don't have a copy of our APA course paper template, I'd recommend grabbing one now. We're going to dive in and we're going to do something analogous to this, but not the specific assignment, because of course, every student needs to write their own paper with their own ideas here. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. So you should now see my screen in Microsoft Word. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with the instructions for this assignment and lay them out so we know exactly what we are required to do in the space available. All right, so the task here, provide a memo outlining the characteristics of today's students. All right, let's just reorganize this. So this is more kind of the framing device here. And then here are some specifics about it. And we're going to make this about something else. Now, those of you who know me know that I've lived in a number of places around the country, one of which happens to be the state of Wisconsin. I spent a very happy summer in Madison, Wisconsin, where I was introduced to all sorts of things I'd never discovered in my life before, like kohlrabi, which is strangely enough related to cabbage and broccoli, while looking entirely different. And also the wealth of different types of super fresh and very tasty cheeses that they have, including things like deep fried cheese curds, which are rather what I imagine crack is like, because you just keep eating them and you're like, oh my gosh, I should stop eating them. And then you keep eating them. So I was reading today about issues that the dairy industry is having in the United States because the new latest, we'll call them Generation Z, are not drinking as much dairy as the previous generations. So it is an analogous problem where there is something generational, and we're going to adapt this assignment here for our illustrative purposes to be about dairy instead of enrollment. So here we're going to go ahead and change this from enrollment management to product sales and marketing. And we're going to change students to consumers. And I think that will actually do us pretty well. So first question is, what are we going to start this memo with? Now, I'll remind you that when we're looking at the suggestions for this, that one of those suggestions was to start with the main point or detail. All right, well, that's fine. We'll just dive right in with that here. So I'm going to start with subject. And what can we do here? Well, we want to grab people's attention and we want to be specific to it. Challenges in marketing dairy products to Generation Z consumers. Is it flashy? No. Is it specific? Yes. Do you read this and know exactly what I am talking about? Yes, and that's what we're going for here. Now, in this case, who might we CC, if anyone? Well, probably not the Director of Human Resources. You know, they're involved in the hiring and the onboarding, but not in the marketing to consumers after this. So if there's someone who's going to be CC'd, it's probably going to be someone either in the division or other executives that they might have conversations with. So and you'd probably list them by position or name here, but for our purposes, we're just going to go ahead and note them by rank here. All right. And let's just come up with a name for our company here. This will be the, let's see, we'll call this Wisconsin Dairy Conglomerate, which I don't think is actually a thing. And all right, so I want to get attention right away, so I'm going to treat this a little bit like a newspaper headline. The purpose of headline is to get someone to read the byline, and then from that to read the first line, and so on and so forth. Faces a all right. Wisconsin dairy conglomerate faces a cliff-like drop in sales if we do not adapt our marketing to attract Generation Z consumers. And that does sound like something important, but it's missing a element that I would strongly recommend. And that element is a sense of time. You know, how imminent is this? Now, I don't know what the particular college you might be working with at for this example, because people will usually pick an institution that they're familiar with to use as a model. But I can think of several colleges that I've lived near that had one bad enrollment year and then decided to close. And so there are many problems like this that are that kind of matter. The shifts start coming fast, and if you don't respond fast enough, that can be it for the institution. And they end up merging or closing or going through a drastic remodel. As in the case of this assignment, they have gotten rid of one whole enrollment division and are hiring new people to take over. So this is entirely in keeping with the genre. You have someone who's coming on and you're saying, okay, this is a big thing. Don't wait on it. Wisconsin dairy conglomerate faces a cliff-like drop in sales in the next fiscal year if we do not adapt our marketing to attract Generation Z consumers. Okay, so we need to give some more background here. And so I'm going to start giving myself some bullet points for what to include. Now, as you are putting this together, part of your goal is to find the things that are most pressing, most attention grabbing, most convincing here. So if I just say, well, traditional consumers aren't purchasing as many dairy products, that's not as convincing as, since let's see, I think this is 2010 when new standards went in place. School food programs. Now, in this case, because I'm not actually looking up the sources, I am making this up. I know it's been a significant drop, but I don't remember. You should, of course, do your own research and include citations here. But if I'm looking at these and I see 20% less milk on average, switching and say, oh, wait, this is the big one. We're talking about revenue. This is the VP of marketing and sales. Yeah, we should start with this one. This is the one that grabs them in their job. And these are actually very related. And so we should actually merge those. And if you have specific numbers, even better. But even if we're just starting with this as, hey, here's the issue, here's some things to grab your attention, it's a pretty good grab for attention. Now, when we get to outlining the specific generational characteristics, okay, that is something that we absolutely want to be looking at. What are the most important things to list as well? So and you can list various things. Now I'm just happening to list some things that were mentioned in the piece I was reading in the New York Times about the decline in dairy consumption. But you can do a similar thing with the cause or the group that you are profiling. If we're talking about Gen Z going to college, there is a lot more concern about where things are located. One of the big problems that colleges have had with enrollment shifts is that a lot of smaller out of the way places that served more uh, regional populations are finding that those people are migrating to big cities. And so there's something of a redistribution. And so to stay current, stay relevant, they've had to do other things to attract students. Or you might have things where in the past, the students that they were attracting were willing to pay full price, and now tuition has got up so much that they've not. So you can talk about that. Now, if I was running with this, I could say, okay, preventing animal cruelty, therefore we need to advocate for this or publicize how we have free range cattle, they're not fed horse hormone supplements, etc. Advertise milk as a pure product, perhaps. Price conscious, well, it is true that milk is usually cheaper than, say, almond milk. Put it in environmentalism. And you there might talk about how almond milk is considered to be a very inefficient use of water in California, which has had some trouble with water supply these last several years. And interesting experiences over possessions, that's a potential marketing angle. So you start out with listing these characteristics and then probably follow up with, oh, how they could work with that, ways that we could exploit that. So as I said, okay, uh, advertising the particularities of our milk and how it's produced, talking about this is original, complete food. Um, Price consciousness, it's less expensive, those other things. Sustainability, especially in terms of water in California. Might say more complete protein back in there. Experiences over possessions. This is something where there's been a surprising amount of marketing over the years that drives different food trends. But I recall when my grandmother told me about the first time that she, as someone growing up in Southern California, saw avocados being introduced there. Now, nowadays, avocados are something you can buy the whole country round, most of the year even. But her father purchased the first avocados for sale in San Diego County back in the early 20th century. And there they were calling them avocado pears and marketing them as fruit, which I wouldn't say is exactly how we use them now in, say, our guacamole and avocado toast and other things like that. But that was how it was being marketed then. And it was initially as oh, here's a novel fruit that you've never seen before. Won't it be interesting to try? And people tried. My grandmother said that she ate that avocado slice, and then she ate another, and then she was a convert for the rest of her life. So, this is a kind of thing where you can propose different things that interface with this. But part of the purpose of the memo is to lead with, here's the problem, and then here's the solution. And then you can use that more in-depth area to follow up with more detail for the people who don't read the bullets, but who want to know okay, what are those specific suggestions? Where are your sources to back this up? All right, so now coming back to this here, with the headings, so how you might separate those? Well, okay, let's go back to our document. Now, keeping in mind that this is actually being written in APA style for the purposes of this assignment, it will look a little bit different. We'll talk about that later. But for our purposes now, we're just going to bold that as a heading. And then for this section, actually, let's take this and we'll use characteristics and we'll turn that into our heading. And we're breaking this down. And so we want to make our heading specific Gen Z consumer characteristics. Or you could even say, oh, relevant consumer characteristics, because there's probably a lot more than we're listing here. But this gives someone, whether this section is going to have the bulleted list or it's going to be a set of paragraphs or both, ideally both, then that gives them a very clear idea. Oh, hey, you convinced me back up here that this is something we need to work on. What are our or solutions. And speaking of which, or areas to explore, or whatever you want to call that. Now, all right, so far we've been talking about it more or less as it was formatted as a traditional business memo. And I'm just going to change this to single space to just give an idea of some of that layout. And now we're going to look at, okay, well, how that would be translated into APA style. So we're going to leave this here, but this would become a paragraph, or we get paragraph formatting. So we'll apply the body text style here. This is the first heading within it. So rather than have the space and rather than have this be line left, this would become an AP level 1 heading. Same thing, AP level 1 and AP level 1. So as you can see, for the purposes of this assignment, we would do some different formatting than we would in the memo, but that's just because of the nature of this, the program wanting to have consistency. And if you were writing this out in your email client, then you would be very naturally having that left alignment, your headings being left aligned instead of center, and so on and so forth. Okay, I think that that's probably a good place for us to wrap things up. So unless you have any questions, we will end there. If you do have any follow-ups, please feel free to email us at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu, to schedule an appointment at my.acu.edu and going to the drop-down list of resources or quick links and selecting Online Writing Center. And you can go ahead and sign up for an appointment online, up to 2 appointments per week. And you can find videos, templates, and more on our website. Have a good night.